This is the 21.5 Show.
You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Whether you're a professional pilot or want to be one, you're in the right place.
Let's get started.
Join professional aviators Dylan and Max as they talk their experience in the airlines, business aviation, and more.
Life is good.
Industry experts, unique stories, and plenty of fun. This is the 21.5 Show.
Here we go.
All right, Max, we are excited to be back from vacation, at least for a little while. Had to do an industry check-in with James. Lots going on.
Yeah, I got right back into the meat grinder here in the hotel.
In the hotel, I'm looking at your screen here. I'm going to go with Hilton.
Oh, that's pretty good because this is more of a downtown contemporary Hilton. I'm surprised.
Okay, I'm getting better at this.
But
I'm in the family vacation home with your dad's hole-in-one certificate hanging out behind me. It's a little bit...
where I started my day yesterday and
That's
ended
right.
in Seattle at 1 a.m. So
It's not easy. July is always the hardest month for us to record shows, but we're doing our best, and we're excited to have James join us again to talk about the latest and greatest. Last time we talked about furloughs in general. Now we've got even more with Mesa, Wheels Up, and other operators. Yeah, it's an interesting little window, as we've said. Max, I think I remember you telling the kids to make sure that they had a comfortable seat.
when the music stopped, well, it hasn't stopped. It's just slowed
Yeah.
down. And the aviation, things be changing. They always are. And James always has an interesting perspective, some very witty, well thought out metaphors, perhaps a quote or two.
Well, the thing he brought to, 'cause here's the thing, Max. In this episode, we're going to talk a ton about training contracts, especially at the regional airlines. And we get a lot of emails from folks about this. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know a ton about them. And I don't know if you
And
do.
it's super polarizing.
Yeah.
Training contract is just like a aviation slur.
Yeah. I mean, for folks that are reading Hard Landing with us too, you're going to start to see a lot more of that coming in the book. And, so you
Our
see this,
timing is impeccable.
it's not like a new concept, but there's a lot of folks that are struggling, especially CFIs that are like, I need to get out of here. I'm done. I can't do another hour of dual given, but I got to sign my life away to leave. And so we cornered James. We got an answer for you on if you should sign these or not, and what you should do, how you should protect yourself, and kind of give you some baselines of like, is this a good contract? Is this not? And so hopefully...
Well, how to navigate it. That's the thing. There's no cut and dry answer. And
Exactly.
I'm sure everyone thinks so.
Yep.
It's all about how you navigate the slippery slope.
Okay, enough dancing around the subject. Let's jump right into our conversation with James. Max, it is time for another incredible industry update with James. Nothing has changed. Everybody's getting hired. No one is getting terminated, and no one is furloughing.
No problems here.
It's all good news. Welcome back, James.
I just came because I like flute music, and it's kind of hard to find outside of this place. So
Yeah. You're just so bored. No one's even using your services.
It's because we have that proprietary melody from.
Oh
Dylan's
yeah.
song, so
Things have been real slow on our end. We're just
it's
sitting
been
around
copyright.
twiddling our thumbs. Not much going on. So
Not much happening. Well, welcome back. Lots to cover. It seems like every 3 or 4 months we check in with you, and there's a whole new slew of things to talk about. For folks that don't know, James works for Raven Careers. He's our go-to guy when it comes to the state and the industry and what's going on. Last time we talked to you, James, furloughs were just starting. You had a lot of great advice for folks that were maybe at Spirit that were looking at furlough. That's a great episode for folks to tune into if they haven't heard it. And we really talk about the mindset of what to do if you get furloughed, maybe the advantage to getting furloughed in the first wave. So we don't want to rehash that so much, but we do need to talk about what's going on in the latest round and how it's affecting the industry. So what can you tell us? Where is the flute playing now?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things going on. So look, anytime there's furloughs, people get nervous because they don't know how to make sense of it. And so we've had some more, right? We've had Wheels Up laid off. They didn't disclose what the actual number is. It sounds like it was somewhere between 10 and 15%. I've seen numbers as low as 80, numbers as high as 150, but I would figure probably in the 80 to 100 range if I was going to guesstimate. We had Mesa furloughed. I think it was 53 total. And then obviously, if we go back further from there, we've got Aero ceasing operations. Spirit did a furlough. They just released some new warn notices. But then we have what we call furlough adjacent behavior, right? Which is not actually furloughing and not actually necessarily even an indication.
Wait, is that a proprietary
It is,
term?
yeah. I just made it up about 14 seconds ago.
Okay.
But you have furlough adjacent behaviors, right? And so they don't necessarily have anything to do with a furlough. Don't necessarily mean a furlough is coming. But when you have companies letting go, it's enough to get people freaking out, and you start having issues like you have at Southwest with Elliott. You have stuff like training contracts that you have at Republic and SkyWest. And so there's all these other behaviors that happen around in the industry that aren't necessarily furlough related, right? They don't necessarily mean somebody's going, like obviously a SkyWest or a Republic doing a training contract doesn't mean somebody's going to furlough, right? But they're behaviors that change that make people more and more nervous that other bad things are going to happen. And what you see pretty quickly is the fear kind of is like a snowball rolling down a hill, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and people get less and less logical on the decisions that they're making. So, for us, we're spending a lot of time trying to make sure people's anxieties are low and make sure they have strategies that are tailored to what's actually going on as opposed to shooting in the dark. So that's kind of the 40,000 foot view.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple interesting things there, and this is one thing we haven't talked about recently, these training contracts. We actually got a flight advice email. I'm going to find that. It says, what's good, boys? Gen Z pilot here. Currently working on my commercial license and also becoming a senior cadet at a regional. My question is, what do you guys think about training contracts and staying with a cadet program? Love the show.
Okay, so a couple things, caveats, just, so my attorney doesn't kill me. We're not talking about any specific company right now. We're talking about training contracts in general. How does that sound, everybody?
Okay.
Okay, so that's the legal disclaimer. All right, you guys are in your 40s as well, correct?
Yeah.
All right, so all three of us are in our 40s. So not to drag everybody down memory lane, but I do think it's important on contracts to understand there has been a seismic shift in training contracts that's happened over the past 6 months that me personally, I've never seen anything like that before. And training contracts have existed all the way back into the since deregulation in the 80s. So if you go back to the 90s, they used to have something called pay for training, right? So you would get hired by a regional airline and you would physically put the money down for the actual simulator training. Now, at that point in time, you didn't have to have an ATP to be a first officer, and you didn't have to have a type rating to be a first officer. But you were probably going to be somewhere around $15,000 to, let's say, $20,000 out of pocket. That used to really tick people off. Pilots used to, go crazy over how could you pay for your own training? This is horrible, right? Okay. But it was about $15,000, $20,000. You would get a job, a year or two later, you'd become a captain. Year or two after that, you would go to a major, right? And that led us all the way into September 11th, where the hiring, we were seeing 5,000 pilots a year, which I know in the past few years of having 13,000 pilots hired per year, 5,000 was an astronomical number, right? And even if you take a look at September 11th through today, you basically have 2001, 2017, 2019 were the only years to hit anywhere close to 5,000. And then you have 2022 and 2024 that had 13,000 pilots hired per year. I think that's important so people understand contextually what was happening hiring-wise. September 11th happened, hiring went to zero for about 3 years, right? Okay, 2004, hiring started to ramp back up to about the 3,000 pilot per year range. Companies instituted training contracts. Now you didn't have to pay for your training, but you did have to sign a contract that said if you quit within 12 months or if you quit within 24 months, you were going to pay them back either the full amount of the contract or a prorated amount of the contract. And prorated is, just to make the math easy, let's say you sign a 12-month, $12,000 contract that is prorated on a monthly basis. Every month, they drop $1,000 off the cost of the contract. So you sign a $12,000 contract for 12 months. Let's say you work there for 6 months and you get a better job. You owe them $6,000, right? Okay. Pilots used to be up in arms. Training contracts are horrible. You should never sign a training contract. If companies just treated their pilots well, they wouldn't need to sign contracts, yada, yada, yada. Okay. When we took a look at a reasonable training contract, it was going to be 12 months because that's how long the training is good for, right? So if you go to an initial or if you go to a recurrent, it's good for 12 months. And the contract would be prorated, meaning it would be prorated usually on a monthly basis. That was fair. Now, you may have signed a $20,000 or $30,000 or $50,000 training contract, depending on if you were going into a Gulfstream or a Global or you were going into a Citation or a King Air, right? But the training contract amount was for the actual cost of the training, right? They weren't adding in additional items. Like they weren't adding in an iPad, they weren't adding in a suitcase. They were like, it was just whatever the flight safety or simuflight or airline cost for the training was, that's what the cost of the contract was. What we would consider to be predatory contracts would have been a somewhat predatory, would have been a 12-month training contract, non-prorated. And the reason why that would create problems is you would work 11 and a half months and then you would quit. You owe the full $12,000 like you worked there 10 minutes, right? And what companies would do is when your recurrent would come up, they would give you a new contract for another 12 months. So you had this like 2 to 3 week window where your like contract was ending up and you could start applying for new jobs before they would put another contract in front of you. Oh, and by the way, they weren't really giving you time off to schedule interviews. So on paper, while they were not technically putting you into indentured servitude, right, you would get just locked into contract after contract after contract after contract.
It was like with the old like coal miners and stuff.
Yeah, where you had to use company money at the company store.
Yeah.
Now, where you got to really predatory contracts, and I'm not going to use the company names because some of these places still exist, you would sign on for an initial that was good for 12 months, but it would be a 24-month training contract, non-prorated. And then at 12 months, when you would go to recurrent, they would give you another 24-month. Now you were in concurrent training contracts. So at 18 months, if you quit, you would not only pay the original 24 months, but the new 12-month recurrent. So they were stacking contracts on top of you. You basically,
wow, I had not heard of that.
Yeah, it was. I'm not going to name the places that did that, but
that's next level.
But those were,
that's Airline?
No, there were corporate operators that did it. Airlines were pretty much I think the most aggressive one I saw, if I remember correctly, was a 24-month contract. The first 12 months were non-prorated, then it was prorated for the second 12 months, if I remember correctly. But you got to remember, training contracts were used in corporate and they were used in the airline. So I appreciate you guys bringing that up. They were used everywhere. Now we take a look at what's happening, and pretty much corporate has not really instituted training contracts yet. I suspect those may be coming, and we'll talk about why I think that's going to be coming here in a little bit. But really what we're seeing is at the airline level, companies are starting to institute contracts. And now the contracts, remember, we're not talking about a specific company, right? We're talking about contracts in general. But in general, these contracts are not just structured based on geographic time. It's not just structured based on 6 months or 12 months or 18 months or 3 years or 5 years or 10 years. It's structured on that or a certain amount of flight time. Now, let's say you decide you want to start Eagle Airlines, right? And you guys decide you want to sign a training contract and you say, okay, hey, James, we're going to hire you. And I'm just making this contract up for Eagle Airlines here, right? But we're going to have you sign a contract and we want you to fly 3,000 hours or 4 years for the contract, right? Well, I have no control over how much you fly me. So if you fly me 1,000 hours a year, I'll finish that contract in 3 years, not 4. But if you fly me 300 hours a year, I have to wait 4 years before that contract's done. Now, if you add a stipulation above that that says, and let's say we operate a 135, right? And so we say, hey, listen, you have to fly 2,000 hours as PIC, but your insurance minimum, say I can't upgrade to PIC till I have 2,000 hours in type or 1,000 hours in type. Well, You can find me 300 hours a year, 500 hours a year, 700 hours a year. See how it starts to become very unpredictable over how long of a contract am I signing. Now you can take a look if that contract has time in there where it says, hey, you have to fly 2,000 hours as SIC, then 2,000 hours as PIC, then, or 5 years, then okay, I'm in this for 5 years max.
Yeah.
But you can't predict. The other thing is, let's say, I don't know, hypothetically, Eagle Airlines is doing really, really well. And so they have West Coast bases and East Coast bases and Midwest bases, and they have Florida bases, and they've got Texas bases, right? And you hire me, and let's say I live in Columbus, Ohio, and Eagle Airlines has a, Columbus, Ohio base, right? Or they have a Cincinnati base, and I go, great, driving commute. And you hire me and I sign that contract and you base me in New York or LA. What am I going to do? Quit? I just signed a contract, non-prorated, that says I owe Eagle Airlines $50,000, $60,000, $100,000. What happens if I go through initial training and I fail? Do I owe you the money? What happens if, great, I get hired by Eagle Airlines. Eagle Airlines puts me in the Columbus base. I've got 1,500 hours total time. All of it's flight instructing, right? All of it's flight instructing within 10 miles of Columbus, Ohio. And now Eagle Airlines bases me out of Columbus as an FO. I fly there for, 2 years, 2.5 years. I build up 1,000 hours of SIC time. They go to make me a captain, right? And now they base me in Denver flying out of the mountains. Never been there before. What happens if they say, hey, it's time to upgrade, and I go, but I'm not ready. I don't feel like I'm ready. And they go, well, you can upgrade or you can leave. What are you going to do? You going to pay them the money, or are you going to upgrade and sit in the left seat terrified, now having a first officer that maybe has 1,500 hours with no time and type? Because the thing is, once you sign...
We've gotten that email.
Yeah. Once you sign that contract, you have to read the fine print over what are your exit options. Right? If the contract says, hey, listen, you can pass upgrade up 3 times and then you have to upgrade. Okay. But if there's no stipulation in there, that's why you've got to take these contracts. They're not one size fits all. You got to go to a labor attorney in the state that the contract is enforceable in. So when you get that contract, on the back page, on one of the last pages, it'll tell you what state that contract is enforceable in. Get a labor attorney. It's $200, $300 for a $50,000, $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 contract. Spend the $200. Right? These contracts are really expensive. They're not $20,000. Right? And find out, other than paying for the contract, what are my options to get out? And you might be surprised. There might not be any.
Well, you always hear about the enforceability too. Have you ever heard of where people are like, yeah, but these are not enforceable and whatever? What's the word on that?
Sure. Okay. So do you want to find out in a court of law that it is or isn't enforceable? Because that's going to be $80,000 plus attorney fees for possibly you and them.
Yeah.
Right? Or do you want to find out for $200 or $300 how enforceable it is? Right? There's a lot of people.
Then you can draft a sensible counteroffer and be like, come back to the table with the recruiter and be like, here's my now, if you furlough me though in less than this 5 years, you owe me pay.
Yeah, exactly.
The whole time too, because this is a unilateral agreement, right?
Or
Max,
or you can ask them to send the contract to you, and for the ones that are not that thoughtful, they send it to you in Word, and you can go in and change the contract, sign that, and hand it back to them. Never seen anybody do that.
Eagle Careers, that sounds like something right up our alley. Now, back at Eagle Airlines, Max, I have an idea too. We won't require people to sign the contract, but we're just going to preferentially put people who do sign that contract into the new hire classes first.
Yeah, and
First.
What do you think about that move?
Just some thoughts. If you guys are having trouble, like you can't get enough people in preferential, one of the techniques you can use is you can put an arbitrary time limit on the length of their job offer. So like, let's say you offer somebody a job offer, 6 months ago. right?
Yeah.
And you go, hey, look, if you sign this contract at Eagle Careers or at Eagle Airlines, sorry, I apologize. Eagle Careers would be the one that does the consulting.
There's
So go
it's
to Eagle
another. We're all under
Airlines.
one holding company.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Eagle
yeah.
Careers is going so well that Eagle Airlines has been created.
Yeah.
Right? So Eagle Airlines says, hey, look, we want you to sign this contract. Well, I don't know. Let's say hypothetically you can't get enough people to sign the contract. Maybe you can just start canceling interviews for people that don't sign the contract. You just say, hey, look, we'll just cancel your interview right now. And maybe if you do that right around when other companies are furloughing, that could, I don't know, create some anxiety. So now, let's say you have all these people that have been waiting in the pipeline with job offers, right? The contract didn't exist when they got the job offer. Just go back to them and tell them you're going to make their job offer good for 3 or 6 months. And if they don't sign, they have to come in and reapply. I don't know. That might be a way to get more people to sign. I haven't ever run an airline, so I don't know. But hypothetically, it could work.
We could do that.
Yeah.
Let's take a time out from our conversation to talk about another friend of ours, Timothy P. Pope, who's a certified financial planner dedicated to guiding professional pilots through smart financial planning. Whether it's saving for retirement, investment management, a seamless military transition, or strategic tax planning, Tim is your trusted financial partner. Join Tim as he leads engaging discussions on personal finance strategies for professional pilots on the Pilot Money podcast. Timothy P. Pope, helping professional pilots make the most out of life.
So we talked about this in previous episodes, the pilot leverage index, which I still think you need to publish on your page, which has the needle that swings in the pilot
I think
to the
it's swung
company.
the other side.
We're at full company right now, right? So here I am. I'm 1,500 to 2,000 hour guy. I'm ready to go. And one of these contracts is sitting in front of me. The labor attorney, this and that. So some good advice there, but at the end of the day, I got to decide: is it worth making a long-term commitment, or what am I going to wait for the pilot leverage index to move the other way? I mean, it seems like how much longer can I instruct? I got to get out of this Cessna 170.
Yeah.
Help me, James.
Yeah, okay. So you don't have to get out of the Cessna 172. So let's remember, right? So 2000, I got my private pilot certificate in my senior year of high school. I had 8 flight instructors in 9 months, right? I mean, they just were. I remember sitting in the FBO and instructors talking about this, how they had interviewed at this really cool new airline called JetBlue. JetBlue had just started, and they were interviewing flight instructors, right? You would get an instructor in, and remember the 1,500 hour rule didn't exist. So There were guys going to the regional airlines, going corporate, getting into jets at 300, 400, 500 hours. They weren't having to wait till 1,500. There was no restricted ATP yet. That didn't exist. ATP, CTP did not exist. You could go out, which I did, and just took my ATP written. No sign off, no anything, right? Go take the written, and then boom, go fly I flew a Cessna 310 3 times, and then went up and took a check ride 2 days later. That was it. It was a whole weekend to get my ATP, right? All right. So it was a lot easier for flight instructors to move up. When September 11th happened, right? Hiring, like right now we went from 12 or 1,300 pilots a month to 400 to 600 pilots a month, right? 40 or 50, 60% drop off. They went from, 500 to 600, 700 pilots a month to 0 pilots a month hired for 3 years. 0. And so I had the same flight instructor for my instrument, commercial, CFI, II, MEI, right? Chad Kohlberg, if you're listening, what's up, brother?
Shout out.
He was my flight instructor for the whole thing, right? I mean, this is a guy that had his entire career ahead of him, and one day it just got ripped out from underneath him, right? You're talking a guy that had probably, I don't know how many hours Chad built over that time, but I bet you probably has about 3,000-4,000 hours of dual given. 3,000 to 4,000 hours of dual given, right? Before he went to Pinnacle at the time, now Endeavor, right? In the right seat of an RJ. So now, right, there is still hiring, right? NetJets is still hiring 900 pilots a year. There, you still got PSA. You do have, obviously you have companies that have contracts, Republic and SkyWest. But you've got aeromedical operators, you've got King Air operators. Like there's jobs out there, but the difference is what feels like a clear path, because a lot of folks have jumped into these fast track training programs, and the airlines smartly said, hey, let's create these pathways so that you can go straight from training basically right to instructing, right into an airline. So for the past 2 or 3 years, that's the mindset people went into flight training with. And to them, they saw a path that they thought was a guarantee, and it never was. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was kind of marketed as a guarantee. So like they weren't made an explicit promise, but there were some assumptions that were made, if that makes sense.
Well, and the other thing, like you mentioned, James, you talk about you as a student, you use your instructor as a gauge,
That's
right?
correct.
Who's a year or two ahead of you. So then you're like,
if they're
oh,
that far
geez,
ahead of you, they might be 9
right.
months ahead of you.
It may
but-
be right. Same thing. Oh, well, this guy instructed for 9 months,
Yeah.
and then zoom off he went. So that's going to happen to me. And
yeah.
It's human nature. We like to focus on the best case scenario
yeah.
first.
So now we have certain regional airlines are instituting contracts. Certain regional airlines are furloughing. Certain regional airlines are delaying their hiring, and certain regional airlines are hiring and don't have a contract. So now a lot of folks are saying, well, let me go that path. They're thinking I need to have 121 time, right? They're thinking if I want to go to a major, I have to go to a regional, which isn't actually true, but it doesn't matter because it feels that way to them. So now they're getting funneled in to certain carriers that have contracts, and now they're all going, I don't want to sign that contract. And so they're trying to flood in other places. So they're trying to flood into a NetJets. They're trying to flood into a different regional that doesn't have a contract. Dylan, what was the regional business aviation meeting like the other day?
All flight instructors.
How many? How many people normally show up to a meeting? How many people were at the meeting?
So in years past, we'd have, 30 to 50, mostly industry folks, pilots, FBO, maintenance, everything. Our last event, I think it was 120 people, and over 50% of them were CFIs.
Okay. So
at least.
So now you have these CFIs are flooding in to wherever else they can go to try and get a job that doesn't require a contract. Well, those companies aren't stupid. They know they don't have a contract. And that works to their benefit because they can raise the competitive minimums of who they're going after, right? And so now you have folks that are rapid firing out resumes and they're just racking up rejections faster than they can count. But here's what they're losing track of, right? Let's, for the purpose of this exercise, let's imagine that I'm attractive. Let's also imagine that I'm wealthy. Let's pretend like I'm intelligent and funny as well, right?
We've tried.
close my
Yeah,
eyes.
exactly.
Yeah,
Nobody,
we've tried to keep.
Okay.
nobody
We've tried to
call
keep this
Eileen.
podcast nonfiction, but
Yeah,
okay.
nobody
All right,
call
here we
Eileen
go.
and ask her whether this is true.
Hypothetically
Yeah, hypothetically speaking. Okay, so for the
And you have a turtleneck on. Okay,
yeah,
got it.
it's
Go ahead.
tactical though. So
Continue.
all right,
Yeah.
so I'm tall, I'm attractive, I'm funny, I'm smart, and I'm rich. Just for the purpose of this, right? And so I go out to a local establishment, and I decide I want to see if I can pick up a date. And so I walk in, and there's a line of people that I find amazingly attractive, right? And so I walk up and I go, if you were a booger, I'd pick you first. Boom, slap. Go to the next one. If you were a booger, I'd pick you first. Boom, slap. If you were a booger, I'd pick you, right? And I do that 60 times. And I get 60 rejections. None of you would be surprised when I tell that story that way. Hey, I walked up to 60 different people and said, if you were a booger, I'd pick you first, and I got rejected. You would go, yeah, it's your approach, right? But here's what the pilots are looking at. That really attractive rich guy who's funny and smart, dude, he's getting shot down left and right. If he's getting shot down, I don't have a chance. So these CFIs are going out, and their approach to networking, their approach to applying to jobs, is the professional equivalent of if you were a booger, I'd pick you first. And then they're racking up rejections, and they're going, oh my God, nobody wants me. They're not going, wait a second, is my approach right? And so then, like, I get this call all the time. Dude, NetJets is rejecting pilots that have 3, 4, 5, 6,000 hours of flight time. Absolutely. And if I showed you their mock interviews, right, you would see why, right? If somebody goes in the door and doesn't actually want to work there, if somebody doesn't do any, and this is, I'm not knocking people, right? If somebody goes in the door and goes, I don't want to work here, I don't care about the company, I don't want to fly corporate, I don't want to hold people's bags, and I want to get out of here as quickly as I can, well, how do you think it's going to come across in an interview? And if you were a NetJets recruiter and you knew you were going to pay someone $130,000 to $150,000 a year, you knew you're going to upgrade them in a year and a half, you knew you're going to give them a 55% match on their 401k, you know you're going to give them 4 crew meals a day plus food, you know you're going to put them through a 121 training program that's AQP, right? That you're going to have a training success rate that's going to be through the roof compared to any regional, right? Well, yeah, you're going to kind of change your selection criteria, aren't you? You own Eagle Airlines and you know, hey, we're a 121 operator and our instructors have been here for 10 years each, and we have we have a third of the failure rate that our next closest competitor has, and we're going to base you where you want to live, and we're going to fly you consistently and we're going to treat you well. Well, you know that. So all of a sudden you're watching these resumes and these candidates flood through the door and you're going, whoa, the quality of candidates going up. Well, you're not going to take someone at the stated minimums on the website. And the problem is they're getting new resumes daily. The competitive minimums are changing daily. They're not going to go to the website and update it every 15 minutes and go, by the way, now it's this, now it's this, now it's this. They're going to change it week by week, and we get to see it because we debrief everybody that is successful in the interview, and we debrief everybody that's unsuccessful in every interview that we send them into. And then we do debrief calls where we go through the application, we go through the resume, we go through the questions the recruiters asked, we go through the follow-up questions they asked, we go through what was the body language. You can't always 100% tell what it is, but you can usually narrow in and figure, okay, it's one of these 3 things, and then make an adjustment. That's what people are paying us for. Anybody can write their own resume, anybody can go fill out their own application, anybody can go on to name your website and go read interview questions, right? But you can't go in ahead of time knowing what were the last 50 people that were successful and the last 50 people that weren't successful. Why? What happened? They can't figure out what is the recruiter looking for because they don't know. But every time a company goes out and goes, we're going to lay off 53 pilots, or we're going to lay off 80 pilots, or we're going to lay off 150 pilots, or whatever the number is, right? Every other carrier that's hiring goes, oh, cool. That just upped what we can look for. And so pilots tend to think in flight time only. Flight time is a qualifier. Like, Dylan, how much time you have?
5,500 hours.
Okay, Max, how much time you got?
I don't know, like 7,000.
Exactly, right? I got like 8,000 or 9,000. The reason you guys don't know is because nobody cares, right? Like, if the 3 of us went into an interview tomorrow, no one's going, oh, well, James has an extra 1,000 hours than Max, and Max says 2,000 or 3,000 more than Dylan. They're not, they don't care. The qualifier, the flight time, is a piece of the puzzle. We have clients that are going in with 1/3 of the flight time of the people they're competing against. The person with the lower flight time is getting the job. The higher flight time person isn't, because they don't know how to differentiate themselves. They got
the Riz. You got to have the Riz. That's what the kids say.
Well, think of
It'd be a Rizzler.
Yeah. Well, so think about it, Dylan. Right? Like you fly a corporate jet.
Yeah.
When you're picking somebody, Flight time probably matters in terms of what the insurance company will accept. But
Yeah.
once the person exceeds the flight time, are you hiring based on that? Or are you hiring based on how they're going to get along with the aircraft owner, how they're going to get along with you, what's their attitude, what's their presentation style, what other things do they do outside of flying?
Yeah, exactly.
And it works the same at an airline.
Yeah, and I think the problem is that when we're talking about flight instructors who are just getting started out, still forming their personality, still forming who they are and their experience, that's all they have to hold on to is flight time, right? And I think that's the point you're making, is that
Well,
No, they got a lot
but
more.
back to the original question, one of the levers that they have is the ability to differentiate themselves, is that they're willing to sign a training contract. That will
Yeah.
put you in a position with less experience and less riz
right
than,
now.
the other guy, if you're willing to take that risk.
Right now, not in 4 to 6 months, when all of a sudden they have a steady flow
This
of
is
people.
aviation.
Yeah.
4 to 6 months. Who knows
Yeah.
what could
So-
happen?
okay.
We
but-
could be
but
back.
I'll-
We could hire 10,000 pilots a month, or we could all be on the street.
But I'll give you a really good example. I was talking to a 1,200-hour pilot yesterday, and they were talking about, does my job experience count all the way back to high school or college, right? For this specific application, we're like, yeah, that's the carriers that you're going to go to. They're going to want that. Okay. They were like, well, I did a job on a dude ranch. Does that actually matter? I'm like, absolutely. Get that on there. Get that on the resume. Get that on the application. They're like, why would anyone care about a dude ranch? And they had 20 minutes worth of stories of like, I drove a combine into a ditch.
Yeah.
But the point was, the whole time we were laughing while they were telling those stories, because that made that person stand out. There's some work ethic things you can make a determination on based on the fact that they worked on a dude ranch, right? Like, if you worked at a McDonald's, I know that sounds dumb, but you have customer service and conflict resolution experience. You can differentiate yourself in more ways than people realize. But the earlier you are on in your career, the more thoughtful and the more creative you have to be in terms of where and how you present that stuff. Because otherwise, the recruiters are used to people showing up and going, here's my resume, what are you going to do that's going to be different, that's going to interrupt that process and get them moving in the direction you need to?
Okay. Well, we need to close out this training contract stuff, but I want to circle back here. There's a million different factors, and we can argue this for forever. But in general, you have your 2,000-hour CFI who's sitting there and is facing this training contract decision right now.
Okay, so if the contract is a year or 2 years or 3 years, depending on where they are flight time wise, it's kind of a no-brainer, because you can run a career projection and go, okay, so if you go to this company and you stay a year or 2 years or 3 years, right? Versus you sat on the street for another 6 months and waited for a different job without a contract, you're probably going to end up in the same place at the same time. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah,
in that 1 or 2 or 3 years, the amount of flight time you would have built, like your qualification building. So in a year, 2, 3 years, it's not a guarantee. But even if you oversign a contract by, let's say, 6 or 12 months, it's not catastrophic to your career. Does that make sense? When you get beyond that 3-year mark, when you get to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, right? Which I think right now the highest might be 5. I'm not 100% sure on that though. That's where that cone of certainty, how great you can predict what's going to happen, starts to go sideways, right? And that starts to increase the risk profile that you could sign yourself into something that actually slows you down versus speeds you up. We won't know till we get to 5 years from now. We really won't, right? Okay. But what I encourage people to do is to run a debt analysis. And this may be something, Tim Pope's probably a good guy for this. But you can run an analysis on how much debt do I currently have? So student loan debt, do you have any house debt? Do you have any car loan debt, anything like that? Versus how much money does it cost me to live? So if you're 22 and it costs you $30,000 a year to live, you want to live in your parents' basement, and you want to take every dollar that company pays you, regional or corporate, doesn't matter, and save that to repay the contract back, could be a good deal. But I would plan on having that thing repaid off within 3 years.
I would be real nervous. A time, I get that. Yeah, like you're probably going to a regional for 3 years anyways.
Or a
The th-
135. Like I
aren't there,
said, we don't. There's
yeah,
these
yeah.
contracts are going to keep popping up, guys. They're not going away.
But this like, aren't there some that are saying 1,000 turbine PIC you need to hit or something like
Yeah,
that?
but
That would make me
there's
extremely
still
nervous.
a time limit in
Is there?
every
Okay.
contract that I've seen.
Yeah.
Everyone that I've seen, right? So, and I really, really, really want to be like, I'm not being cute with this. We're not talking about a specific contract right now, and whatever contract you get, you've got to hand it to attorney, because just because you saw your buddy's contract, you don't know if they changed the version of it. It could be better, it could be worse, right? So whenever you get a contract, take the contract that's in front of you and hand it to an attorney. You don't know what version of that contract you have. And just because, like I said, you saw buddies, but the ones that I have seen that have had a flight time in there have also had a timeline in there, right? 5 years as an example. So you're either going to hit this flight time, or you're going to fly with us for X amount of time, which I would assume if anybody ever puts a time in that contract, I would assume that that's how long I'm going to be there for. You could beat it. I don't know. But that's your worst case scenario that I would want to plan for.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense. Anything else on training contracts, Max, before we go right to Eagle Careers contract?
No, I think we're good.
The last thing with training contracts is, look, it's different when I talk to a 38-year-old that has a spouse and kids than it is when I talk to a 22-year-old. Don't take it as a one-size-fits-all, do it or don't do it. You really have, for your own personal situation, you've got to take a look at your financial situation, and you've got to have that contract read by an attorney. For some people, depending on the contract, it could be a really good deal. For other people,
that's the thing.
It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's not.
Yeah, and so the point is too is don't just be like, oh, they want a training contract, I'm not going to even look at that. Like, you have to look at it and apply it to your specific situation, because that your willingness to sign that and your determination that it's not really going to affect your career trajectory either way, except for that you may get a job that you won't get elsewhere. Like, it could be a good deal.
Yeah. So and these training contracts are going to likely continue.
They're going to be here.
So
yeah.
You got to evaluate.
We got burned.
Yeah, it's not a one.
Yeah.
It really, honestly, it's not a one size fits all.
Makes sense.
You got to evaluate them. So
the only other thing I'll mention too is from the corporate perspective, I feel like there's always been an expectation, contract or not, that if you get a type rating out of a job, a new type rating, that you're going to stick around for at least a year, because somebody's spending in excess of what they would require to spend in terms of recurrent versus initial training. And I feel like that expectation has always been there, whether or not, it's in writing or not.
I've run into too many people that I never expected to ever see again in my life. And so I've learned, do not burn that bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
When we see this all the time right now, and guys are doing it, and it's like Max said, at least where we're at, it's pretty much an unspoken thing. Stay for a year if someone's going to pay for your initial. And people bail all the time on it. And this is one of the reasons why you see, I mean, we used to have some very predatory training contracts in Arizona, where companies would take out personal loans in your name to pay for training.
Yeah.
And that was the only choice you had. And so, like, you're on the hook for this loan. I mean, but part of it we do to ourselves sometimes.
No, here's a good one though. That's another thing. One size doesn't fit all. So what if you flew for somebody and they typed you in a Citation XLS, right? And you flew there, and after 2 years, they decide they want to get a Challenger 300. So they send you to initial, and then you leave 6 months later.
So here
is that.
So
you didn't. It wasn't your choice.
Yeah. So this is where we talk about intention versus impact, and how you leave a place matters. So here's what I mean by that. When you leave, be as graceful as you can going out the door, right? And so I'll talk about a couple of different options. These are going to be really corporate options. This doesn't really apply to an airline, right? But number one, give the other pilot as much heads up notice as you can. Look, different flight departments have different cultures. If the culture of the flight department is you walk in and tell me you're leaving, we fire you, then guess what? They set up the environment where then they're going to get minimum notice. That's not on the candidate, right? But there are a lot of departments where I've seen dead clear the folks were like, okay, cool, we'll support you. You know, they're rearranging time off. They're doing different things to support the folks. Number two, if you can space out between when you give them the notice and when you leave so they can find a replacement, right? That's a pretty huge deal. If you can have some candidates lined up that are solid candidates, and then if you can provide contract services while they get that person up and running, right? You take those 4 things. It's not perfect, right? But the other folks involved can see they did it in an honorable way. Look, the owner might hate you. I don't know. But at the end of the day, if you do the best you can to keep the owner liking you, but if you can, at least have the other pilots respect you going out the door. I get it, right? There are plenty of places where that's not possible. I've worked for some really, I'll call them interesting places myself, right? So this is not, I'm not trying to be Pollyanna-ish and go like you can always make every exit a positive one. But there are a lot of different things that people can do that over the past 2 years they didn't even try and do.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, guys,
exactly
you're running out the door, basically giving them the middle finger. Don't do that, right? Like, and that's really hard when the music's moving really, really fast and it's midnight and the champagne's flowing. But
yeah,
4 a.m. always comes, and the lights get turned on.
And to your point, I mean, Max, like right now, we're starting to see friends that have left business aviation and now the airline that they're at may be slowing down. And it's like, oh, you know, I could take a leave and maybe go back.
Yeah.
And there's all these things that you didn't expect.
You never know, man. You never know.
But it's a tough one.
Yeah, that's what the similar situation I was in, where I left less than a year after getting a new type rating in my job before I came to Southwest, which was not of my choice. And I just addressed it straight up and said, hey, look, and did the best I could with the cards that I had to play. And it all worked out okay. Like the owner was not.
They're business people. They get it. They're looking at how do you look. And like I said, I get it. There are the business people out there that are traumatized human beings, right? But by and large, they're business people. They get it. You're looking for. They respect how you treated them walking out the door. Not did they get exactly what they wanted.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Okay. That's a good little riff there on that. You want to handle one more here, James, before we let you go? Slightly shifting gears.
I'm trying to pump Eagle Careers up the best I can right now.
Okay. It's funny. We got in.
I can't wait till you get emails after. Where do I find the website for Eagle
it's
Careers?
ravencareers.com. Well, it's a redirect.
Yeah. The link will be in the show notes. Yeah.
James.
It's the Eagle Air. We need to make a cool Eagle Airline sticker. I think that's next on our.
Make people sign a contract to get. Make people sign a contract to get the sticker.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. That's right. You're gonna rep our brand.
Yeah.
You will put this on your suitcase.
Yeah. So this is an interesting one. I stole this one off of Pro Pilot World. Folks that have listened to the show for a while know we're huge fans. ProPilotWorld.com. Great message board for folks in especially business aviation, but in all aspects. I think you'll see James there every once in a while throwing out some wisdom.
The cool thing with Pro Pilot, real quick with Pro Pilot World, it's a great place to start lurking and finding out what's going on in the market. So when you start networking, you understand what to talk about. Like people really, the cool thing about Pro Pilot World, it really is pilots helping pilots, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's a very different feel. By all means, don't go make a post 3 seconds after you get on there. It'll be a little rough on you. But a lot of reading and then asking questions, man, people will help. People will help.
Great resource.
And utilizing the search function.
Yes, utilize the search function.
Okay, so I pulled this one. I logged in this morning and happened to see this one, and it kind of caught my eye, and I think it'd be a good kind of second topic to discuss. Says, I've been at SWA almost 5 years. Quality of life is great, and I enjoy the work. I have just under 20 years to go, though, and all of a sudden, this place isn't looking as stable as it used to. I was seriously considering going to United several years ago, but it just didn't make a lot of sense for my family. Southwest's latest drama is kind of the final nail in the coffin for me, though. I realize there are no guarantees, but I'm torn between riding this out, possibly into the ground, and hoping to find something in maybe 5 to 10 years, worst case scenario, when it would be easier for my family, or make the jump now in hopes of a more stable future. I'll try to, here's the objective. They basically want to know like what are what's the data at United, what seniority will be for them in 19 years, and the most interesting factoid is it looks like this person wants to be based in Newark.
Wait, they
I
want to
would
be based
assume
in
is a
Newark?
junior
Did you say
base.
they want to be based in Newark?
Yeah.
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 Jesus.
Well, which I think is interesting because I think that does change things, because I would assume that Newark is probably one of the most junior bases at United. I'm just going to
What was
assume
their
that.
seniority? Because it's going to significantly affect how I answer this question.
They're SWA 5 years.
Almost 5 years?
Almost 5 years. Oh yeah, yeah. We need a reply here. Are you junior or senior to Max?
Yeah.
we need to.
That's what I'm trying to
yeah.
determine here, because this is going to really
It says
shape
almost 5 years.
It's
Okay, so to summarize, 5 year
It's not the same as me.
Southwest FO. We're going to assume they live in the Northeast.
As somebody that grew
Getting
up
worried
on
about this.
yeah, as somebody that grew up on a 3-mile final for runway 29 at Newark, saying you want to
Yeah.
live there is, I'm just trying to catch my breath. I apologize.
Yeah. This,
No, we talked about this in the last episode, James. Obviously, his wife grew up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is why he wants to
Yeah.
live there.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
Okay. So I think that really brings up some of the Elliott news that Max and I spoke about briefly in the last episode, and so there's maybe some uncertainty. So, James, we'll go with you first, and then Max, you can throw in your 2 cents as well, since you guys both have interesting perspective on this.
Yeah, this is a frying pan into the fire thing. And so working for a company I liken to a marriage, right? And so if anybody hasn't been married, I apologize. Some of this may or may not make a ton of sense, but if anybody's been married for more than 10 minutes, they know it's not always smooth sailing, right? You're going to have your ups, you're going to have downs, throw kids into the mix, right? It's going to get a little more complicated. And so when you make a decision over whether or not you want to stay married or you want to get divorced, right? That's based on what's the underlying foundational structure that we have here. Basically, not to sound too crass, but do we have enough good things to outweigh whatever difficulties we're going through right now? And that's really the fundamental answer to this question, because right now it may look like United is more stable than Southwest, and depending on what happens in the next couple of weeks or months, United may actually be more stable than Southwest. We don't know. But a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, that could be completely different. And so if somebody has a 20-year career, they're going to ride a wave up and down, right? There's no way, if we rolled the clock back to 2008, 2009, 2010, that anybody in their right mind would compare United to Southwest, right? I mean, it would be the exact opposite conversation. People would be going Southwest, Southwest, Southwest all day long. It's super stable. Take a look at the fuel hedging. Take a look at how they came out of all these different financial crises. Like, Southwest was the golden child for stability. And now here we are flipping it around, and now it's like, oh, is Southwest stable? So just keep in mind, 20-year career, there's going to be ups and downs. If you want to live in Newark and you're looking at commuting to a base for Southwest, depending on if they're going to stay in FO for quality of life versus upgrade to captain, so on and so forth, that, right, when you talk about that versus United, that can make a very substantial difference very, very quickly. When you take a look at, do you want to fly international, or do you want the opportunity to fly different aircraft, specifically wide bodies? Well, then yes, that is a very solid reason to leave a Southwest for a United. But given what's going on with Elliott right now, I mean, if you just read the news and you see some of the chess moves that are being made in regards to who can buy back stock at what discount and so on and so forth, Southwest leadership's not going to walk away with this without a fight, right? And so Southwest does have some headwinds right now. You've got the issue with Boeing, you've got a single fleet, and you've got Elliott. So I don't want to pretend like that's not there. But I'm not sitting in a corner worried about the viability of the airline, or, hey, are they going to go out of business, or what's going on here? Yeah, they might have some rough patches. But 5-year seniority is 5-year seniority. I mean, hey Max, 5 years, what percentage up the list is that roughly?
I wish though I don't really look at the total list. I look at the list in the base that I know I'm going to stay at forever.
Yeah.
So
Gotcha.
I can tell you that I'm bidding 33% as of this month.
Okay.
And I was 5 years a month ago.
Okay.
So that's where I'm at.
And what's your upgrade in base? Time-wise?
Well, I mean,
7 years?
Flux, but no, there were guys that were I don't remember what the most
7-year
junior was, but it
guys?
was, I would want to say 7, maybe,
Yeah, that's
7-ish,
what. Okay,
I would say
so
was.
so I know everyone's freaking out about the Elliott stuff right now. It's really early on, right? But read the news. The leadership is moving some pieces on the chessboard. And yes, if there are some schedule and quality of life and type of flying things to go to United, yeah, that's a completely fair, because 20 years of doing the flying you don't want to do is going to be miserable. But once again, go back to any serious friendship, go back to any serious type of relationship you've had. You've been through ups and downs, right? You've been through rough spots, but you hung out for them to see how it kind of evened out before you decided you wanted to jump, unless there was some underlying foundational issue where you're like, hey, this is my sign to leave. And in this case, I would say underlying foundational is basing type of flying, so on and so forth.
And this email says, they enjoy the work, the quality of life. They didn't mention anything about the flying. It seems like this person, and they posted a couple follow-up, it's more about the uncertainty that's got them more than anything else. Business. And I know, and actually a couple people mentioned that in the post. They're like, dude, that comes with the territory here.
So
any other?
Yeah, I'm going to flip that around. I'll flip that around real quick, because this is no different than risk tolerance, right? When it comes to flying, like how close are you willing to get to a thunderstorm versus me? Turns out I'm a wimp, not very close, right? Okay, so for me personally, based on my experience, right, that's not enough volatility to leave. Not yet. It's too early for me, right? But if I was sitting at 5 years and I'm like, at 7, I'm definitely not leaving and I don't want to wait it out, it's a different story. But this is a risk profile question, because you jump to United or you jump to Delta or you jump to American or you jump to I don't care where you jump, somebody else is going to be in the spot in the next 20 years in your career, wherever you're at. It won't necessarily be for this reason, but some fleet planning decision won't make out. Somebody will board an airplane, a doctor, and end up on a YouTube video for something, right? Something's going to happen that's going to create an issue, right? And so, relatively speaking, it's not a really high amount of volatility yet over there, in my opinion. Max, you may disagree with me on that one.
Well, no, there's the way I choose to look at the Elliott thing is from. I'll try to keep things positive here, as much as I can. But when I go on a trip with a captain and they say, "Oh, what do you think of the Elliott thing?" I say, "Look, the people at Elliott, say what you say. They're not dumb. They're very savvy, very good businessmen. And the reason they've come and bought stock at Southwest and done it is because they see upside potential, not because they're looking to liquidate the company for its assets or things like that. They see an opportunity to take a large position in the company, provide influence, and increase the value of that stock. And so because there's strong balance sheet and underlying fundamentals goes into that decision. And so I choose to look at it with the fact that, look, things are going to be interesting for sure in the next 3-6 months, maybe up to a year, depending on how this goes down. But I think at the end of the day, we'll probably emerge better and with increased revenue and in better shape because of their influence and perhaps the board, there'll be new board members and a new CEO. Maybe there won't, but either way, the influence that they're apply and pressure that's being applied is going to institute change that maybe should have been done before. Everybody has an opinion about this, but the way I choose to look at it is not like, oh my God, the company's in peril. I think it's going to be something where Southwest is going to come out the other side in a better position and more competitive and make changes that, and who knows what will happen. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, and for me, it's a little bit different in that I don't even think about it positive or negative. It's just too early to tell. And so I know at 5 years, if I quit, I can tell what I'm giving up at least right now. If I wait 6 months, 12 months, right? The hiring is it's not like last year where, oh, boom, I missed a month of hiring. I lost I lost whatever, 200-300 slots. So you can afford to wait it out a little bit and see how it goes.
Yeah,
The
that's
other
true.
thing too that we're not mentioning is like you talk about the risk profile of staying. What's the risk profile of being on the bottom of the seniority list at United right now? I would argue there's more risk there
That's
and
right.
then in an
I
election
mean,
year
And
or all these other things, and you know
oh,
that
is it an election
United
year?
will in the
Have there been any
yeah,
debates recently? I
there's
haven't caught
possibly.
them.
This is the debate.
Right.
This is the
Yeah,
better
yeah.
debate. Um, so I think that's also the other huge risk there. And I guarantee, I mean, for folks, listeners that have been reading Hard Landing with us, we're starting to read about this kind of stuff, right? All these hostile takeovers, stock purchases, all these maneuvers. You don't think something like that's probably going to happen to United in the next 20 years at some point?
We'll 20 years
It's
from now, we can look back and we'll all know what the truth was.
you're probably going to be in the same boat, you know, at a different point. And at Southwest, you're going to have 5 more years of seniority under you. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
If you
And
don't
the
mind
thing
the
about
flying.
the airline business, the number one thing you have to understand is there's no way to make a long-term prediction about literally anything.
Yeah, no, you can predict it's
Um,
going to be volatile. I mean,
yeah, I mean, so you make the best decisions you have with the information that's available, and then, part of it, you kiss your rabbit's foot and hope
Yeah.
that luck is on your side, because a lot of this career is luck, is timing, and timing is
it's
luck.
that, but look, the key to the career is relationships. And I'm not trying to sound like a cheesy PSA, but the amount of times I've had someone that was junior to me, or somebody that was subordinate to me, or somebody that was a peer that saw me on the side of the road and went, or even somebody that just didn't know who I was, said, "Hey, I will give you a chance." Right? The key to surviving volatility is actually relationships and connections.
That's true. And because that equals opportunity.
It does.
You have so much more opportunity the more it's directly relation to the side of your network and everything else, and what people think of you, your reputation, just like we said with the training contract and media. There's Dylan and I have been flying around at the Scotts Airport now for over 20 years, and there's things from 19 years ago we still talk about that something happened literally 20 years ago. Like,
Well,
I know when you're 20 something, 20 years ago seems like a long time, and then when you're in your 40s, you're like, oh, that didn't seem like that long ago.
Is that 20 years? Oh, geez.
the other thing that people underestimate is how valuable being known is. Being known is better than being better. You will choose, right? Like, you think about all the people you know around the Scottsdale airport, they will choose to work with Dylan or Max before me because they know you. They know they can trust you. They know what your word is worth. They know you can, right? Like, and so unless you're known for bad things, in which case they'll definitely choose me over you. But
Yeah.
but that's why those relationships, and that's why that networking. And I know over the past 2 years, no one saw value in networking because everything was going so fast. You didn't really have to. But that's why we're seeing folks, like, we have 1,200-hour pilots that are now applying for jobs that have 300-400 hours of jet time. Well, how'd you do that? Oh, well, I went down to the airport and hung out and did X, Y. Like, we have people that are going into air ambulance jobs. We have people that are going into Part 91 jobs. We have people that are going into Part 135 jobs. We have people that are going into regionals without contract because of people they know. And that exists I'm telling you, the networking exists just as well inside the airlines as it does inside corporate. There's fewer carriers, so I can't talk about it as much as openly. But that networking works just as well at the airline level as it does at the corporate level. Because fundamentally, companies are looking for good people that fit. That's what they're looking for. And if they get time to talk to you and they get time to know you, it's a much easier decision for them.
And I would think it's even sometimes can be more important at the airline level because you have so many resumes that look almost identical.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to college and I was a flight instructor, and now I've flown into regional airlines and I have my 1,500 hours. Here I am. That's that guy and gal and times and thousands.
That's why right now we just started recently doing resume reviews for people again, where we're going, because it's not just here's the resume. It's not just like here's how to fix the formatting on the resume. It's a competitive audit to help them understand, when you put this in front of a recruiter's hand, here's exactly where their eyes are going to be drawn to. Here's exactly what they're looking at. Here's what's going to stand out. Here's why they're going to have trouble telling if you're qualified. Here's what they're going to actually start having conversations on. And then they can start to figure out what they want to highlight on there. That way, because remember, this is all about, the hardest part of the whole job thing is getting someone in a position of power to start a conversation with you. It's the hardest thing. Once the conversation is started, most anybody can jump in and continue the conversation from there. But how do you interrupt somebody who is trying to ignore you actively and get them to actually pay attention and listen for 4 seconds? That's what you got, 4 seconds to get their attention and get them to do something. You need to think about that when you're putting that resume and application together. Dude Ranch, put something on there that's interesting and different. Please make sure you've worked for a Dude Ranch if you do that.
Yeah.
and if you do get a job at a Dude Ranch, drive a combine into a ditch. It'll be a good story.
Yeah, you need stories. All right, I think that is a good place to wrap it up. So in summary, be a Rizzler. Be careful with training contracts. Stay at Southwest. And polish up your resume. James can help you with all of
is essentially what James just said. Is trying to get somebody who's actively trying to
Exactly.
ignore you to give you 5 seconds of their time.
Why did
That's what we've been training. We were our kids. We were trying to send them out to Riz girls. They're like 8 years old, 7
Yeah.
years old. We're like, yes. What do we? I can't remember what the.
Well, because
terrible
they all the kids say now is like you do something. It's like a video game, like do this and you get +3 Riz. So it's like it's just exactly. But I mean, that's why you should go to Embry-Riddle, where there's only one girl for every 11 guys, because your Riz is going to be out of control.
So
if
you're forced.
So on the Riz level, I not only dated, but I married the president of one of the 2 female sororities on campus.
See, that's a monster, because
There
the
you go.
odds were.
There you go, bro.
Yeah,
It's all strategy. It's all about.
have to bring it. So
It is. The
So
secret is you have to wear sweatpants with a polo shirt. That's actually how you get their attention. So
that's the move. Okay. All right. Okay. It's good. All right. So visit ravenriz.com
yeah,
to get your career
ravencareers.com.
advice.
Thank you.
We'll have a link for James in the show notes. Keep sending those flight advices in, and look for the application window at Eagle Airlines to open soon. Anything else to close us out, James?
No, I'm looking forward to see the contract to get the stickers. I'd like to get one as quick as I can.
Okay. Sounds good. All right,
that
Max.
does it. Another one in the can with our boy James.
Wow.
He's good. He's good at what he does.
I was surprised to learn about some of the decisions that folks are going to have to make. I mean, I
tough.
can't imagine having a contract with 6-figure contract and try and make that decision without some guidance. That's
Well, the hard part is it's all for
yeah,
depending on when you get into aviation.
Yeah.
The contrast can be so
mm-hmm.
dark that it just makes it that much more difficult. If you got in at a time when it was tough, which has been for the bulk of history.
Yeah.
Things like this wouldn't be quite as bad, but when you see everybody else ripping through it, all of a sudden, somebody throws a training contract in front of you that wasn't there a year ago. It's tough. It's stressful. So
yeah. Well, we've got a link in the show notes. It's our own exclusive link. Gets you access to James right away. As quick as you can get on his schedule, the better. So just open up your podcast app and click that link, and you can get the ball rolling and help make the most the wisest decision, I guess, for your specific situation. I think
good luck.
Yeah,
good luck, Airman.
Yeah, keep us posted. Max, I don't know when we'll be back again. We've still got lots more. We got still another month to go in our crazy vacation run. So we'll try and get another episode in. We got to read another chapter one of these days.
Yeah, we got to get our landings. We'll find the time.
We'll do our best. Signing off from the office in the Pines.
From a high rise in downtown Seattle.
We will continue to find the time to chat with you. Until next time, remember,
flexibility is the key to air power and deciding time.
And removing flexibility. Right? Sometimes you have to give up some flexibility. That's part of the deal. All right. Talk to you guys soon.
The statements made in this show are our own opinions and do not reflect, nor were they under any direction from any of our employers.